Is the Mullett Arena the most difficult arena to play in the National Hockey League in 2022? We're going to ask that question on today's episode of Locked On Coyotes. Might be early to ask it, but we're going to ask it anyways. So be sure to stay locked in.
You're Locked On Coyotes, your daily podcast on the Arizona Coyotes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everyone, to Locked On Coyotes. This episode brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline is where the game starts. I'm your host, Robyn Leonio. That's Carl Pavlock right beside me on today's episode of the Locked On Coyotes podcast. I want to thank everyone for making this show your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. And yes, that includes on YouTube. We got a great show for you guys on today's episode. We're talking, we're going to have a discussion today about the Mullett Arena because the Coyotes are going to be coming back for, a 3-game homestand and going back away for but they've got a lot of home games coming up. So might as well talk about the Mullett Arena and everything that comes with it. It's been a while since we did because it's been, outside of the 2 games I just had last weekend. It's been a while since we've talked about the Mullett. And let's go and start off, Carl. And I know teasing y'all with that question. We're going to answer that in a little bit. I do want to address something, though. That it was really wild that happened last week, and that, news articles are picking it up in the last 24 to 48 hours, which is making things really interesting. If you haven't been following, a fight broke out in the stands at the Mullett Arena between Boston Bruins fans and Arizona Coyotes fans at the Boston Bruins Coyotes game on last Friday. And it was a good, like a whole 2-3 rows of fans just getting in a brawl. But what's interesting, Carl, is the latest news that's coming out is a fan lost a fingertip.
Yeah, I think it was just like the flesh of the fingertip. Craig Morgan said it didn't get to the bone, which is good because looking at your fingers, I imagine that's something that could be easily removed, as any wood shop teacher would tell you. But it was a pretty crazy story. It was really interesting to see it kind of happen. And Coyotes Twitter really knew about it like right after, if not the morning after. And now it's just starting to get out there in the national media. And it was a pretty crazy scene.
Yeah, it was pretty wild to see all that go down. I saw the video footage, I think the night of, within hours after it happened, or if not, just the very next morning. And I was like, wait, what the hell is this? And the crazy thing is just to see, everything that went down. Yeah, losing the finger is the weirdest part about this.
Yeah.
But, there was, think about how many fans were involved in this and how big it got and just how crazy it was for fans to get to that point. I'm trying to remember what happened up to leading that. I think there was just some egging on shortly after Lawson Krause had scored a goal, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. And I don't think we're ever going to know like all of the things that led up to it. I'm sure you don't get a fight like that like just after a goal. There's probably, tension brewing for a while, if not the whole game. Looks like there was 5 citations and 1 arrest for this, which is just not something you expect to see. Also, I feel like we need to be very clear. do not do this. Do
No.
not
Yeah,
have
absolutely.
fights
Like
in an arena. Or
here's the big thing. Depending on what fan you are, if you are a Bruins fan or if you are a Coyotes fan, um, either way, like, whoever's fault it was, it doesn't matter. Like, do not fight in the, like, do not we don't condone violence inside the arena,
yes,
because people are going to these games to have a good time, to enjoy a hockey game, and to see something like this. Is it funny for us spectators to kind of watch it happen? Those weird things happen a little bit,
yeah,
but after we get those giggles out, we're like, oh crap, someone got seriously hurt. People got arrested. Now there's like, it was putting into a light of, some fans looking at Coyotes fans as evil, and some people are looking at Bruins fans as evil, depending on what side. Like, we don't want this. We just want to enjoy the game.
yeah. And as we saw with that fight, it cannot be just contained. It tends to have like a spillover effect, and you don't want to end up hurting anyone, like especially like an innocent bystander. People who bring kids to games, so like don't want to have someone swinging when there's like a small child that doesn't know well enough to get out of the way. I don't want that to be the case. Hopefully, this is the last time we see a fight at Mullett Arena. I do kind of wonder though, because it's a new arena. They may not necessarily have the precautions in place to like de-escalate these kind of situations. I'm sure they're going to be have a much larger police presence at future games. If that hasn't started already, I can almost guarantee that's going to be the case.
Speaking of which, another somewhat funny thing I'll mention that did happen, was the policeman that was there, one of the policemen that was there, Supermaning on top of the pile.
Yeah,
Um, that was a scene to be seen.
it was a chaotic visual spectacle. I think that's kind of like the thing that stands out right away, and just not something you expect to see. Like I cannot think of the last time I saw a fight like that. You occasionally see videos of like fights at games, but they tend to be like smaller until something dumb happens. This was like a brawl at a concert.
Yeah, it's something that, like, again, like we said, it was absolutely wild and a like a weird thing to see, and something that we hope that we'll never see again,
Yeah.
because of the image and just the overall idea of of being safe and fun at an event like that. So
If you're ever at a game and you feel like the tensions are starting to boil over with people, just there is staff in place to de-escalate and make sure that things do not get to that level. Most arenas will have like numbers that you can call, you can text, and get someone out there and just kind of stop it from getting that far. Like I said, it doesn't just start with a massive brawl. There's usually something that's happening long before then. And this could have been stopped before someone lost the tip of their finger.
it could have been, but we'll never know we'll probably never know the full story, unless we get sworn testimony from every single person involved in that fight. We'll never get the full story. But until then, that's felt like it'd be, we had to address it because this is a Mullet Arena episode, and and the news articles were coming up. But we're gonna keep talking about Mullet Arena. We're gonna ask that question: is the Mullet Arena the most difficult arena to play in the National Hockey League this season? We'll have our thoughts in a moment. But first, a word from Carl.
This message brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. It's where you can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. from pro football to college bowl season to basketball and the World Cup and hockey. They've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, which of course you do, you're listening to a sports podcast, you can find those on BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get all your betting information. Head over to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts.
I want to thank everyone once again for making Locked On Coyotes your first listen every day. For your second listen, be sure to check out Locked On Sports today. From the games that matter most, the biggest stories in sports go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports today is available on this app, on YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. So let's go ahead, Carl, and now let's officially ask the question: is the Mullett Arena the hardest arena to play in the National Hockey League? I'm going to give a quick answer, and I want to know what your thinks. I'm going to say yes, it is this year.
Uh, I kind of agree. I'm not sure we're gonna agree for the same reasons though. So this is interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's what makes it that's what makes this a really good question, right? Because you know, anyone who's listened to the show for long enough know that you and I agree on a lot of things, but we also disagree on a lot of like simple, you know, some simple ideology. Like, and here is something where we're very likely going to have very different reasons and why it's a difficult place to play.
yeah. I mean, the numbers kind of hold out that it's difficult. The Coyotes are 3-2-1 at Mullett Arena, which is not the record you would expect them to have, and they've beaten teams like the, you know, Florida Panthers, the Boston Bruins, took the Winnipeg Jets to overtime, got close to the New York Rangers. Like, other than the blowout game against the Stars, like
Yeah,
they've been pretty solid at home.
yeah, they've looked pretty solid, and they've had a really good showing outside of that one game, and the Flyers game, you can chalk it up as whatever you want because some people look at the Flyers in a negative way. Some people's like, oh, they're okay this year. They're decent. So that's a good win. But I'm like, that's just like, all right, that's just a win. The other ones that you mentioned, yes, those were pretty big. Some of the losses that they had, yeah, but they were close.
Yeah.
And the other wins they had were good wins, including especially the game against Boston. That was a big win.
And I will say, like the Bruins, they're not a great team. I would argue they are better than the Coyotes. Um, like even if just a little bit better, they're still better than the Coyotes. So like
Mm-hmm.
any win against the team that's better than you, that's a win in my book.
Absolutely. And let's get to, some of our thoughts of why we think it's a difficult arena. And I'll start with reason number one for me, Carl, and that is the idea that the sound has nowhere to go. If you have, when you have fans right on top of you, essentially, when the noise is right on top of you, you know, it makes an impact. It really does. People have talked about, and I'm going to say, use another arena as an example. Um, let's say the Bell Center in Montreal, right? Those fans are
Sure.
die hard and they're loud. And there's the idea that if the further down you go, because of the louder it's going to get, because of that, because that's and when it's down there, it's hard. It's just like hard. You can barely even hear yourself think. Um, and in a smaller arena like Mullett Arena, that's not the case in that kind of scientific way, where it's like where there's so many people and the noise just funnels down. It's the case where there's just no room, so the noise just bounces off of everything, and it sounds a lot louder than how many people are there.
Yeah. There is absolutely more space in the average NHL arena for the sound to go. And we have experienced that before. Like being at Mullett Arena, one of the things that I saw an article talk about is how you can be standing in line to get your food and have a perfect view of the ice. That is unlike any other arena in the National Hockey League. And right behind that food vendor is the wall. That is the entirety of the space. It's a very intimate space. It's going to be great for what its purpose is. But when you jam that kind of space with a lot of screaming fans, if the Coyotes are giving them something to scream about, that's always good. Then you're definitely going to get that. So even though it's less people, that noise does just take up more of the arena.
Yeah, and that's to be expected, right? Like it's not like why would, let's say, like someone build an arena with like noise dampening material on the walls? Like
Yeah.
that's not the goal of a sports arena. You want to try to make it loud and hard to play at. If whether you are the Arizona Coyotes or the Arizona State Sun Devils or whoever else is playing there.
Yeah. Maybe noise canceling to keep the noise like in the building so it doesn't go out, but you want your arena to be loud. Like uh, you know, as I get older, I enjoy loud arenas a little bit less every year. But the average person, especially the people that sports cater to, they want that loud, engaging experience. They want chants. They want all kinds of fun stuff. So arenas are built to accommodate that. And ASU built an arena that's going to be really loud for any time they fill it.
Absolutely. I want to hear one of your reasons.
So I definitely think that just the newness of the Mullett Arena is giving the Coyotes a significant advantage because no one knows how the boards are. No one knows what the ice quality is. There hasn't been much scouting for that. There's only been 6 games, and that's going to be the case. Like when the New York Islanders come into Mullett Arena, they're going to have no idea what it's going to be like. And I think that is definitely going to influence how the opponents play. If you don't know how the boards react, you can't really do your shots as well. If you don't know how you're going to be skating the day before, you can't prep. And Mullett Arena is just a giant question mark for so many teams.
Yeah, and so many teams are going to be visiting for the first time, and their first time on the ice there will be morning skate.
Yeah,
And morning skate lasts what? 15 minutes, half an hour? Like that's not a whole lot of time to really figure it out.
yeah. And it'll be interesting to see if like by the end of the season, if teams have started to figure it out, and the Coyotes record starts to slip, or if we start to see like, hey, the Central Division teams, they know it well enough by the third time, but you get an East Coast team, they don't know it as well. So we may get to see some kind of like fun numbers work out. I'll be interested to see what those kind of breakdowns are.
If you see it move in that, if you see the trend moving in that way, where people are when you see a returning team visit there, I'd like to see the numbers behind that and see how much of an impact that actually makes. I think that'd be an interesting thing to observe and see, like the second time, the third time, the fourth time they visit the arena, how adjusted they get to it.
Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see like how the Coyotes learn their new arena. They have not had much time to practice there.
Yeah.
They were on a very long road trip,
And
which
and
is why we
and
haven't been talking about it.
and even if they weren't on that road trip, they practice at the ice in Scottsdale, which has very different ice and boards. So
Yeah,
that also makes an impact, um, not to mention the arena. I mean, yeah, the arena itself was done in October, but the other facilities weren't ready until a couple weeks ago. So
I'm surprised we didn't get like a nice video detailing the visitor locker rooms when the Boston Bruins got there, just because there was like so much kerfuffle the last time.
well,
Uh,
the idea was because the locker rooms the Coyotes were using, I believe, was the visitors' locker room at the
yeah,
time, and the home locker room wasn't ready yet. So because of that, the Coyotes took the visitors' locker room, and because there was no other locker room available, that's why they used the community iceplex as a makeshift away locker room, the one that made everybody cry, like, and just freaking go berserk over for no reason at all.
God. See, it's so long ago. I forget the details of it. Like that was the worst controversy. I think we could all admit, like, so overblown at the time. And I always feel like the controversies involving the Coyotes are mostly overblown. That one just was like, yeah, man, what do you want? What do you want to do? Yeah, it's temporary. Who cares?
Absolutely. We're going to give our final thoughts about Mullett Arena, and answering the question, is it the hardest arena to play in? Both Carl and I do agree that it is yes, but we have different reasons of why it is. We're going to go finish off our thoughts in just a moment. I do want to give a little bit of a PSA though from our friends at the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. And that's, you're hanging out with some friends and putting back a few drinks. A few drinks becomes too many. As the evening comes to an end and people start to head out, you think of calling for a ride. Nah, you live nearby. You can make it home, okay? It's no big deal. What are the odds you get pulled over anyways? And even so, what's the worst that can happen? Your insurance goes up, you lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, you can kill somebody. Everyone knows about the risks of driving drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. So let's bring on our final thoughts on answering this question: is the Mullett Arena the most difficult arena to play in? Once again, we do agree that is yes. Different reasons. We talked about. I gave a reason talking about the fan noise. You talked about the newness, the unknown, so to speak. Um, I think another thing, and I could be completely wrong about this one, but it's the idea. It's you know, the fans say this, but who knows what anyone else people. But people play down the Mullett Arena in the sense like, oh, it's a small arena. They make fun of it, right? So it kind of gives the Coyotes an advantage because a lot of Coyotes players they have been talked to about it, like, while they're not, I wouldn't necessarily say they use the word proud of it because that's kind of whatever, but they're like, yeah, you know what? It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So they're embracing it in the best way they are able to, knowing that it's a temporary solution for them.
Okay. Yeah. I can see that. Before we go any further, I do want to point out that the Boston Bruins have a 15-0-1 record at home, so that is probably the worst arena to play in. But they're a good team. The Coyotes are not, and like you were saying, like teams underestimating the Coyotes have repeatedly like regretted that decision. We saw that, multiple times at home. I definitely say we saw that with the Bruins. But we've also seen that with the Toronto Maple Leafs, who the Coyotes were able to surprise. Like, do not underestimate the Coyotes. The teams that have success go in there ready to play.
Yeah, that's the idea, and I think that's why the Coyotes had a terrible game against the Dallas Stars, because I think even though the Stars went into that game to, from what we were able to talk about, like they kind of came in ready. They knew. I wouldn't say they knew what to expect. They didn't know what to expect, but they didn't want to take advantage of anything that was going on. Right? They're like, oh, okay, we're the better team. We know that. They took everything seriously, and I think the most important part was they started off really quick, really early, which quieted the arena. That was a quiet arena I was in when I was there as media. Like, yeah, it was fun. Like, it was still the Mullett Arena, so it's still louder because like I said, it's smaller, nowhere to go, like I mentioned earlier. Um, but when the game is like 6-0 or whatever, like you're gonna know it's gonna be quiet as hell.
Yeah. I mean, that is definitely the case. And there's plenty of reasons why the Dallas Stars were a team that did that, and some of the other teams did not. Um, we can talk about the fact that, hey, same division, so they didn't want to give any points on the table. But then again, the Jets game was a lot closer. We can talk about the fact that just Dallas in general has been very good this season. They're top of the division, and quite a few players had things going on at the time. I cannot remember where's their like the start of a point streak for Dallas. I know that didn't they have a pretty long one earlier this year?
I think so. That's my knowledge. Just not coming to me exactly. I don't have the numbers on me,
Yeah,
but
it's really hard to remember the games that were like 2 months ago. We had no home games for a month. It just makes it very fun to try and like be like, oh, what was the Mullett Arena like last time we played? But yeah, it whatever it is, like teams do seem to in a very small sample not play well at Mullett Arena.
yeah. I also add one more thing, and it kind of is a offshoot in a similar fashion to my first reasoning. The Coyotes fans embrace the mullet.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that goes to the crowd noise, like the fact that the fans are happy to be there. That's something.
Yeah, you know, there are so many fans out there that I look at fan pages, I look whatever. They're like, "Duh, I'm not going to pay that much money for a single game ticket. That's ridiculous." But I think it really kind of, the Mullet Arena in its small capacity, it does wean out those that obviously, well, first, unfortunately, those that couldn't afford it, one, but two,
Yes.
those that just, you know, the, if, the richer people who just also just um, don't want to spend money on like that much money on a poor team.
Yeah.
It brings the real fans out that can afford it. Um, but it
You
really
you
does.
you do kind of have to be like to pay a lot for a team that you know is going to suck on the ice because the Coyotes are not good. Uh, it takes like a certain level, and it's a mixture of being a more diehard fan and having the money. And you could be very diehard and not having much money. You could have a lot of money, and maybe you're less diehard. But either way, like there's that good mix, and we're getting like a really good atmosphere from that. Um, it'll be interesting to see if that continues because the Boston game had a lot of Boston fans, but there definitely been the game we went to against the Jets. I think that was predominantly Coyotes fans.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I, I saw a couple Jets fans out there, but
Yeah, a
you know,
couple, but overwhelmingly, in a way that you don't typically see at a Coyotes home game, the Coyotes fans have outnumbered the
and I
opposite.
will say this: the Boston Bruins fan showing, I believe, could be an offshoot because this was discussed in a fan group that and it makes a lot of sense. I looked at the schedule and everything like that. it makes sense that Boston fans love to travel if there's a reason to do so. The Bruins, the Boston Bruins, the Boston Celtics, and the New England Patriots all visiting Arizona in a span of a couple of days. So, like, why not? If you say, let's just see all of our teams in one weekend, get away from the frigid cold of Boston, Massachusetts, and go to Arizona for a weekend.
Yeah. I mean, that's reason enough. It's December in Boston. I've read Infinite Jest. It does not sound fun. And there's a reason why. There's this part with the Arizona Cardinals in that book. But yeah, who knows? That could be it. It could be Boston is a really good team, an original six team, so you got a lot of bandwagon fans. Who knows? But either way, it's just the start of a really interesting season at the Mullett.
I'll also say get ready because snowbird season is here. So you'll see other fans from other teams.
Yeah, that's the thing. Way to end this on a down note.
Oh, I got it. Yeah, I just had to do it. I'm sorry, everybody.
Snowbirds.
Anyways, though, that's going to be it for today's episode of the Locked On Coyotes podcast. If you like what you heard, don't forget to leave a review, like, comment, subscribe if you have yet to already. We're available everywhere you get your podcasts, including on YouTube. Don't forget to interact with us on social media. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/LockedOnCoyotes, and on Twitter at LO_Coyotes. I'm personally at Robyn_Leonio. Carl Pavlak is at Carl Pavlak FFH. Interact with us, ask a question that you might have, we might answer right back, or on a future episode of the Locked On Coyotes podcast. Thanks again, everyone, for listening to today's episode. Hope you guys are staying safe out there. Hope you guys are staying healthy. And don't forget to howl on.